Let's talk about a guy named John Kiriakou. He was a decorated CIA counterterrorism officer right at the tip of the spear in the War on Terror. In fact, his team captured one of the most senior members of al-Qaeda. But that massive victory, it actually kicked off a chain of events that, believe it or not, would land him in federal prison. And that's where we get to the real paradox of his story, the part that just doesn't seem to add up. Kiriakou was the one guy in his group who said no to being trained in the CIA's new torture program. He thought it was illegal, he thought it was immoral, and yet he was the only person connected to that program who ever served time. Not the interrogators, not the guys who designed it, him. So how on earth did that happen? Okay, let's get into it.
All right, so to really understand this, we have to go back to the months right after 9/11. John Kiriakou is a 13-year veteran of the CIA. He's a big deal. He's running counterterrorism ops in Pakistan, and his whole job is to catch al-Qaeda operatives trying to slip out of Afghanistan.
So in March of 2002, his team scores a huge win. They capture Abu Zubaydah, who everyone at the time believes was the #3 guy in al-Qaeda. Kiriakou himself is there, helps put him on the plane to a secret CIA black site. Fast forward 2 months, he's back at headquarters, just standing in the sandwich line at the cafeteria, and a senior manager from the Counterterrorism Center walks up and asks him a question. A really casual question that would end up changing his entire life. He's asked if he wants to get certified in the use of enhanced interrogation techniques. Now, Kiriakou's never even heard that phrase before, so he asks, what's that? And the manager just says, we're going to start getting rough with these guys. But don't worry, he's told. The whole program's been cleared by the Justice Department, signed off on by the president himself. It's all good. But getting rough doesn't even begin to cover it. We're talking about waterboarding, of course, but also something called the cold cell, where prisoners were stripped naked, chained to the ceiling, and doused with ice water for days. At least 2 people died of hypothermia from that one. And then there's the sleep deprivation, keeping prisoners awake for up to 12 days straight. They're chained up with industrial lights blaring and death metal blasting 24/7. And to put that into perspective for you, science tells us that your organs can start to fail after just 9 days without sleep. The CIA was authorized to push it to 12. So, faced with this reality, Kiriakou has to make a choice. He asks for an hour to think about it, and he immediately goes to get some advice. He finds a very senior officer, someone he really trusts, who just cuts right through all the fancy language. He says, let's call a spade a spade. This is a torture program. And then he gives him this warning, and it is so chillingly accurate. He says someone's eventually going to take it too far, a prisoner's going to die, and somebody is going to prison for it. Do you, he asks, want to go to prison? Kiriakou went right back to the manager and said no. He said he had moral, ethical, and legal problems with the whole thing. He found out later that 14 officers had been asked to join the program, and he was the only one of the 14 who said no. And the backlash at work was immediate. I mean, think about it. He just captured Abu Zubaydah, a massive win, but he was passed over for promotion. The head of the Counterterrorism Center actually wrote that his refusal showed a shocking lack of commitment. And behind his back, people started calling him the human rights guy. And trust me, it was not meant as a compliment. Okay, so this is really important. The whole debate isn't just about morality. It's about effectiveness. I mean, did it even work? In the case of Abu Zubaydah, the very guy Kiriakou's team captured, well, it became this perfect A/B test for 2 totally different ways of getting information. And the difference is just, it's night and day. At first, an FBI agent named Ali Soufan was in there. He spent weeks just building rapport, talking, offering coffee, letting Zubaydah write to his mother. And yeah, at first, he got nothing. But eventually, Zubaydah started talking, and he gave up actionable intelligence that literally saved American lives. And then the CIA took over with torture. The result? He shut down, went completely silent. In fact, before any of the torture started, Abu Zubaydah actually laughed at the FBI agent because they were hunting for a key planner but didn't even know his real name. He said, his name is Khalid Sheikh Mohammed. That was the very first time U.S. intelligence had ever heard the name of the 9/11 mastermind. And it came from a conversation, not from coercion. So, if it wasn't effective, why do it, right? Well, Kiriakou believes there were 2 things really driving it. First, just a raw desire for revenge after the biggest intelligence failure in American history. And second, money. The CIA had already paid 2 psychologists $180 million to design the program. $180 million. Kiriakou ended up leaving the agency in 2004. For years, he just waited, thinking surely someone else would come forward and talk about the torture program. But nobody did. Then, in 2007, he got a phone call from a reporter. And that phone call just blew up his entire life.
So this reporter tells him a source is claiming that he, Kiriakou, had tortured Abu Zubaydah. At the same time, President Bush is on TV denying any torture program existed, and then he suggests that if anything did happen, it must have been some rogue CIA officer. Kiriakou thinks, oh no, they're setting me up to be the fall guy. So he goes on ABC News and lays it all out. He says, 1, the CIA is torturing people. 2, it's official U.S. policy. And 3, the president approved it. Well, within 24 hours, the CIA files a crimes report against him. The Bush administration investigated but passed. But when the Obama administration came into office, they picked up the case and pursued it like you would not believe.
And get this. During the legal discovery for his trial, Kiriakou's lawyers found a memo. The Attorney General's office had said they didn't think Kiriakou had actually committed espionage. And John Brennan, a senior White House advisor at the time, wrote back with this chilling line: charge him anyway and make him defend himself. The government spent $6 million to prosecute him. They hit him with 5 felonies, including 3 counts of espionage. He was facing 45 years in prison. They basically just waited until he was completely bankrupt from all the legal fees. Then they dropped the worst charges and offered him a plea deal that, at that point, he just couldn't refuse. So Kiriakou took the deal. He was sentenced to 30 months in federal prison. And then, just 6 weeks before he was set to be released, the Senate published its official torture report, which confirmed that every single thing he had said was true. And this right here, this really just captures the fundamental injustice of it all. John Kiriakou, the man who exposed the program, went to prison for 30 months. The CIA officers who actually conducted the torture, 0 months. The psychologists who were paid $180 million to design it all, 0 months. And he was vindicated at the highest levels. I mean, Senator John McCain, who was himself a survivor of torture, stood up on the floor of the U.S. Senate and said that because of John Kiriakou, the American people finally knew the truth. But, validation doesn't exactly pay the bills. The price he paid for telling the truth was just immense. The government took away his pension. He was bankrupt. When he got out of prison, he couldn't even get a job at McDonald's or as an Uber driver because he was now a convicted felon. The cost was, well, it was the complete destruction of his professional and financial life. And that really leaves us with this big, nagging question, because the story of John Kiriakou isn't just about one man. It's about a system that decided to prosecute the person who exposed a crime instead of the people who actually committed it. So you have to wonder, what happens next time? When the system makes an example out of the whistleblower, who's going to be brave enough to speak up?